So the Overwatch director discusses Blizzard balance philosophy and upcoming campaign, what lies in store for 2023. Yeah, I'm going to skim this because I don't think this is actually a very long article, to be honest. It looks pretty short. Blizzard learned a lot about the game they created. Even before the shooter was playable, the studio faced a difficult decision regarding the game's campaign. The single-player mode was originally meant to launch with Overwatch 2's multiplayer, but was relegated to a post-launch update months before the game was released. Keller says, although it was a really difficult decision to split the game up, it was the right call to make. We found ourselves in a position where we could not release all of the content we were building for Overwatch 2 until the campaign was finished. Recalls Keller says the development on the campaign was going slower than he wanted to. Have you guys noticed that they're now just calling their PV game a campaign and that's it? When before they were pretty upfront about like, hey, this was supposed to be a game that people played for years. This is not a good sign. Things change, Corpa. Yeah, things big change, Corpa. So keep in mind, this is the same PV game that they took all their hero designers off of Overwatch 2 and instead made them create talent trees for all the different characters, 3 talent trees per hero to have like a multitude of builds and all this stuff. And now they're just calling, and I find it interesting until the campaign was finished. I'm reading a little bit too much into it probably, but I don't think they've ever referred to it as just the campaign before. We couldn't release all the content that we were building for Overwatch 2 until the campaign was finished. We found ourselves saying we're going to keep withholding content for our players to release everything together with our original strategy, the campaign, or we're going to have to change the way we think about releasing the game. As a result, Overwatch 2's campaign will be releasing gradually starting later this year, and Blizzard is still finalizing how its content will be rolled out. The chance to tell Overwatch's big overarching narrative is something that Keller is particularly excited about. As he points out, it's not something you could really do in the middle of a multiplayer game. Very true. How much longer in the season do we have? 20 days. So 3 weeks to a season, right? To the next one. So what, like February 7th would be February 6th, February 7th or something like that would be the new season. And then 2 months after that will be the next season, right? So April. So the first one would be April potentially, because there's no way they're going to launch on an off season. So PV will either have to come out in April or August because every other season has a new character. So 2 months, then another 2 months. And that's assuming, but the way they talk about it though, releasing gradually starting later this year. I'm still telling you, Chad, it's going to be funny when we just, you play a couple missions and you got to wait until next season to play a next couple missions and wait until next season to play another couple missions. That's like the worst way I can see it going. And I'm pessimistic always on that. So I will believe it when I see it. You can go a lot more in depth, not just the characters, but all the big events that are happening inside of it. That's something the team is incredibly passionate about. This says Keller adds that Overwatch 2's bright, hopeful, and inspirational futures is a setting the developers keen to explore. Until then, Keller has his hands busy with the segment of Overwatch that players who have competitive multiplayer. I have a hard time finding ways to get enough time to play the game while also trying to run my game. Also, this is very true, by the way, that there's actually a consistent thing, chat, where I can't imagine trying to be a game dev who actually has to constantly play your video game and keep up with it if you really want to stay in touch with what players are going through in any given day while also doing that as your job. You're probably not going to play that much, to be honest. And I don't think most, that's just how that works. For Blizzard, Keller said its lessons have been more wide scale. The director admits the studio has a lot of work to do in addressing feedback regarding the game's reward and progression systems. Oh, well, that's a good sign. And recalls Blizzard were realizing in Overwatch 2's first season that its original plan to issue one major balance patch per season would not be enough to stay on top of the shooter's rapidly shifting meta. No way. Yeah, I still think it's so interesting. How do they even think that would ever be enough in a game like Overwatch? One patch per season of 2 months. Because it's actually funny, a patch every season of every, 2 months. So basically in Overwatch 1 chat, they used to patch on the dot every month. And that was it for balance, right? And so how that worked was every month they did a patch. And then in Overwatch 2, the reason why they only had one Overwatch 2 balance patch per season was probably because at the start of the season, they have a big patch. And in the middle of the season, they have a patch. And the middle of the season comes 3 to 4 weeks after launch, which coincidentally is the same as every month we do a patch. So what they've really learned is the same lesson a second time, that releasing one patch per month is not enough for most people. And I don't think that's surprising. If you guys remember back at peak Double Shield, one of the times that the player base really kind of lost it was because the player base had been waiting for an Orisa patch, and that month they waited like 2.5 weeks. That month they did not do anything to Orisa, so they waited another month. And then the following month after that, they added 1 second to the cooldown of Shield. It was something like that. It was something so ridiculously minor, and they went, "Oh, okay, and then now we have to wait another month." And you know, and then at that point, you're 3 months into it, a double shield, just full on Orisa shield meta, and you're going like, as a player, you're sitting there going, "Man, this is, yeah, I guess we're screwed," right? And so, the problem with a lot of these, the problem with a lot of the cadence of these patches, one major balance patch per season, is it puts so much pressure on any individual patch to fix so many problems. And it's for people who play a lot, if I know that they're patching every month and that patch doesn't immediately fix the problem, and I know nothing's going to happen for at least another month, and that patch might not also fix it, I just don't play for 2 or 3 months. I just come back in 3 months. That's what I did in Overwatch 1. I just stopped playing because I knew that there was no reason for me to keep playing. What should it be instead? I think usually at the start of a season, I think realistically for a lot of this stuff, how seasons should work is that you do lots of patches at the start and go boom, boom, boom. And then in the back half of the season, you just stop and you AFK until the next. So I was saying, from what I remember when we first went over this, was one major balance patch per season at the 4 or 5 week mark is too late. There should be a balance patch at 2 and 4. So that way you get 2 patches per season, not 1. So you get a patch at 2 weeks, you get a patch at 4 weeks, and then maybe one final patch, something is totally but 90% of the time you're not going to. 2, I think, is okay. 1 is too little. It's a difference of like, you give it 2 weeks to get data, and then after that you test it and you get another 2 weeks and, you know, see what's going on from there. But yeah, also you might not even be able to do 2 and 2 because maybe after the first one you more, but you get the idea. But that's my personal thoughts on it. That's it. Like, there's always going to be a million opinions on what patch times would be better, this or that.
Look at the size
like,
of
doesn't
that
matter.
thing.
League's patch cycle is 2 weeks, seems to keep things pretty fresh. Well, I think there is also the opposite side though, where if you patch too often, there's fatigue. That's why I think at the start of a season, you have a big balance patch that changes big stuff, right? 2 weeks after that, you do like a small one. 2 weeks after that, you do another small one, and it leads into the next season repeat. It's really not too far off of what they have. I just think the issue is just having only one puts so much pressure on that one to fix things. That's it. Which is kind of what they're doing now, by the way. If I remember right, this season, they did a season launch patch. But the other problem, though, is those season launch patches really have to, switch things up. Like, if the seasonal balance patch doesn't significantly change the meta, it just feels like the exact same thing. To give you an example, I mean, chat, I don't think Sojourn's going to get nerfed next season either. So I would expect at a high rank, I'm going to have a Sojourn meta for 3 to 4 seasons straight. That's what I'm personally expecting. And so, at some point too, it's not just the quantity, but also what you're changing to actually impact what people are running on a consistent basis. For players of any balance or multiplayer title, balance can feel like an exhausting game of whack-a-mole. The same patch that dials back one overpowered monstrosity can just as easily raise up 2 more in its place. Right now, Overwatch 2's monstrosity is Roadhog, a beefed-up tank that can dish out one-shot kills while boasting wild amounts of health. Keller has bad news for Roadhog mains. His damage is on Blizzard's chopping block. But the beefy boy... beefy boy... is a good example of how balancing Overwatch can be tricky. Roadhog was never changed to be this strong. He's overperforming because other heroes were changed, enabling him to move into the place he's at right now. Yeah, but we talked about it though. A lot of us players talked about, oh boy, I can't wait for the Kiriko Hog combo in my backline on ladder in 2 months. Or whatever it was, not 2 months. But, and they put a Kiriko picture right next to this quote. Oh god, they know what they're doing. It'd be very easy for us to change him so much that he becomes unplayable or nerfed so hard that people would think he was a throw pick. He explains, referring to heroes who the community dub weak enough to guarantee a loss if they're picked. You know what's interesting, actually? Nerf so hard that people think he's a throw pick. The only character I think that is actually an active throw pick in Overwatch these days is probably Sombra on my team. I think if I see a Sombra in top 500, I assume they're trolling. Otherwise, every other character, I don't care. We'd like to avoid that, so we're trying to be careful here, but at the same time, I want to make our change meaningful enough to actually have a real impact on him and the game. Also, what's up, Flats? Wait, Flats said, I called him months in advance. No one listened to Omega Lol. Yeah, but to be fair, though, we talk about all sorts of stuff, and a lot of the stuff we say is dumb, too. So I've given enough hot takes on Overwatch that I'm sure half my takes are stupid as shit at this point. But when I'm right, I can point at them and be like, but I was right. Why didn't they listen? The Keller adds that because the community will always try to find the strongest heroes to increase their chance of winning matches, Blizzard has to juggle a hands-on approach to balance with letting the community shape its own meta. There's a lot of nuance that goes into balance, Keller explains. It can feel like there are certain heroes that are allowed to be strong or popular, and others that when they do become really strong, the community has a pretty adverse reaction to it. I think it's all very natural. One of the things we've been talking about internally is what happens when heroes that have mechanics that can be frustrating or stifling to play against become really powerful. Okay, this is a very funny quote in Overwatch because we were just talking about Sombra, right? And then we were also talking about Genji and how I've talked about it before, but Genji I feel is a character that if at a high level where people have really good aim, then if Genji is powerful at my rank, then for your average player who probably can't hit every shot on a double jump in Genji, he's gonna be OP. Like he's gonna be running everyone down. And that's why Genji traditionally is not super meta on ladder, because if he was, then he would just be a scourge to the rest of the game. So right now he's kind of niche and he's just okay. He's not, I would say in general, Genji right now isn't OP. He's not, I don't even think he's like super underpowered either. He's just okay, which is probably a good thing for the rest of the game. But it is funny, though, that it can feel like there are certain heroes that are allowed to be strong or popular and others that when they become really strong, community has a pretty adverse reaction to it. This is very true. I don't recall a single time in Overwatch's history where people got really upset Winston was meta. Not once. Yeah. Or Lucio. Yeah, or Lucio. And so even Reinhardt, right? A dive meta? Yeah, but I don't recall people being very upset about the characters in dive that often. The most complained about character in dive meta was a Widow most of the time. It was actually had a lot of character choice. You could pick all sorts of stuff. Has Lucio ever not been meta? I mean, Lucio is another good example of if Lucio is meta, people like Lucio. Diva, I don't know if Diva being meta. I mean, when Diva was first added to the game, people complained about her a lot, but to be fair, not first added, sorry, when she first got buffed, to be fair, she had something like 400 armor and a 4 or 5 second defense matrix. So I think that was just an actual overpowered character that was a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, and this is, I've tried to talk about this before. One of the things we've been talking about in terms of what happens when heroes that have mechanics be frustrating or stifling become really powerful. Yeah, like Sojourn and Roadhog. And I remember Flats was talking about this a while back. It was just very funny to see Blizzard as a whole remove certain one-shots, right? So Rhinepin no longer one-shots 250 HP targets. We removed all the CC, we removed a lot of shields, removed a lot of annoying things. And then we're going to immediately add Sojourn, who is a second Widowmaker. It's weird. It's like there's two different people working on it and they just didn't talk, you know? And then, you know, the same thing with the Roadhog thing or whatever. The Roadhog stuff is, I think, a normal, like, growing pain of going to 5v5. So the director points out the same topic can be applied to current discussion around Roadhog, who opponents can find stifling due to his ability to one-shot more fragile heroes while still being difficult to kill. When heroes like that become really powerful, the community can have a pretty big reaction to it. While there are others like Orisa, who is fairly powerful as well, but her kit feels fairer or more steady. I think the community will look at a hero like that if he becomes a new dominant meta, new dominant tank, it's more accepted. It's a discussion that Blizzard is wrestling with at the moment. We don't want all the heroes to feel samey. We don't want the tempo of every fight in the game to feel the same every month. Says Keller, who adds, although the team enjoys the variety of abilities and mechanics in Overwatch 2, they are acutely aware that many of those can be pushed too far. There's a push and pull and a lot of nuance of the way we do this. Who's gonna tell them? This is one of those things where this is such a long time discussion in Overwatch. It's like, guys, yeah, some characters that are meta are really annoying when you start playing against them super regularly in every single game. And they talk about like, wow, it's actually really annoying when Hog is meta, but people don't care as much when Orisa's meta nearly as often. And it's like, well, what makes that the difference? You know, and it's funny because isn't this just a really old conversation about a lot of things in Overwatch? It's just like, why do players find a lot of things in our game unfun? And they definitely had to walk through those discussions internally at some point to go through, yeah, we should remove a lot of CC, we should remove a lot of shields. And now they're going in and going, oh wow, there's also other things that are really annoying when they're popular. It's another big one is just Widow, right? Orisa can't one-shot. Yeah, a lot of them are shared with one-shots. Very true. But also, it's going to be interesting. Also, Orisa, chat, she doesn't one-shot you, but if she hits you a spear into a wall, she basically will kill you. She is going to do... She has so much kill pressure if she catches you with a spear. The spear is so nuts. If the spear had slightly more wind-up, I would appreciate it. Because it doesn't feel like if I'm playing a reactionary character, like let's say I'm Genji deflecting or Mei Ice blocking or cast rolling, I have a chance to react to it because the animation is instant. I wish if it had just a 0.2 second wind up or something on an animation on the character, it would feel a lot better. Like Junker Queen Axe. Yeah, there's no telegraph. Or Sigma Rock. Yes, Sigma Rock is a good example, but Sigma Rock is pretty, that's pretty slow. But Orisa, I think, playing around spear is difficult because it's so fast. That's all. If countering Orisa means ignoring her and shooting the rest of the team instead, it's pretty evident there is a problem. Well, I'm curious because what you're describing is actually a more fundamental Overwatch thing where right now healing and tanks in general feel so strong that there is no potential way to kill a tank unless they get randomly purpled by your Ana or something and they don't have a Kiriko cleanse available and you just roll them over. Or they don't have cooldowns. Otherwise, and if you think about the timing that Orisa doesn't have cooldown, she's gonna, and I talked about this the other day with Sure4, the Orisa is gonna walk up to you, she's gonna spin, she's gonna put up her gold, she's gonna spin again, and she has maybe a 4-second window where she can die, right? And most people at lower ranks are never gonna push her in that tiny window to kill her. But higher rank players, they punish her really hard. Like if an Orisa walks out and she doesn't have a spin or gold, she dies instantly. But aka the old Zarya problem, yeah, it's close to it. Even just a couple seconds on cooldown of some of those, the character would be very, very different. But what we're trying to talk about is in Overwatch 2, most of the time tanks are relatively not killable because there's only one of them. And so you're either going for a hard flank or you're trying to snipe somebody across the map. Pick one. The other example, by the way, are the middle characters like Torb, who can tank the one shots but also shoot tanks and kind of do insane damage all the time. And same thing with Bastion. I think those are actually like pretty good right now, weirdly enough, outside of snipers. Anyway, when he's not chasing down unruly hogs, Keller is looking ahead. There's a lot to unpack. He gets giddy discussing it. Aside from the campaign, the director says there are multiple heroes and a lot of maps planned for 2023, along with a lot more events like the game's ongoing Battle for Olympus event. Keller also teases several new and returning game modes, including an entirely new one he's so excited to announce and a mysterious Season 3 skin he thinks the community will go wild for. Several new and returning game modes. That's interesting. In the immediate future, Keller is saying the team is focusing on fleshing out Overwatch 2's roster of support heroes, which he admits offers the least amount of choice compared to the game's tanks or damage dealing roles. So we're really focusing on supports right now. The next two heroes we're going to be releasing are support heroes, says Keller. Teases they bring some things to the game that we haven't seen before. There's some new mechanics and really exciting ways of interacting with your own team. All that in store. Seems like Keller will be putting his newfound time management skills to the test. I could talk about the future all day. Still find his mojo. Okay, so 2 new support characters this year, right? Because there's 2 new characters coming out this year, I think. Supports with new things, Monka W. Well, chat, I mean, why would you be concerned about new things in Overwatch? New things in Overwatch are normally not that crazy. It'll be fine. Seagull, years of practice have allowed you to say that with a straight face. I respect it. Well, what do you mean? I can't keep a straight face on that. Only a little bit sometimes. And just remember, chat, when Kiriko's, the ceiling is always getting higher on some things, right? When they added Sojourn, we got the strongest DPS that's probably ever been added, I think, in Sojourn. And then they added Kiriko, who had the strongest ultimate ever made in Overwatch, which is saying something considering how many ridiculous ults we have in Overwatch that they added a new character who actually has a stronger one than anything else in the video game. That's crazy. So, we'll see.